Hey everybody, so we're continuing our study of creation stories here in our world mythology series, and I'm particularly excited today because I'll just editorialize here for a second. We're about to study my single most favorite creation story. It's from the Mayan people. It's called the Popul Vuh. So we're coming to the Americas here. We're going to look at a pre-Columbian Meso-American story from the Mayan people, more specifically the Quiche, around Chiapas in southern Mexico, that whole kind of Honduran, Belize, Guatemala, Yucatan region. And this is an amazing creation story, and it just raises so many awesome questions for us. Let's keep the work focused on Campbell's cosmological function, pedagogical function, sociological function, all that stuff. And also think about the nature of God as we enjoy this story together. What kind of God is God? Is God all-knowing and perfect, or does God kind of learn on the job? You know, does God evolve too? And is that portrait of God in the Popul Vuh, how different is it from the Genesis story? So again, that's always a kind of a handy technique for us to always, as we approach a new creation story, kind of check it against the Bible, and just to see what some of the differences and similarities are. So there's a lot going on here. Let's get started because I'm eager to share this story with you. So this book, the Popul Vuh, which means the book of the people or the book of the community, was an oral tradition until about 1550. You know, Pedro de Alvarado is the conquistador that comes into this region in 1524. So that's the conquest, just a few years after Cortez blundered his way into Tenochtitlan, what today we call Mexico City. So a bunch of Spaniards in boats with weapons and horses and silver breastplates are invading the indigenous regions of Central America, as we call it now. And so around 1550, this oral tradition was transcribed by one of the priests. And then it was translated into Spanish in the 1700s. So I'm reading from an English translation of that Spanish translation. It's particularly notable because in the brutality of the conquest, almost all Mayan literature was lost, was intentionally destroyed. That's what conquerors do. You know, if you really want to erase a civilization, you don't just kill its soldiers. You destroy its religion, its philosophy, its culture, its history, its poetry, its art, its temples, its libraries. And they did. And so there's a certain aching in our heart when we reflect on everything that's been lost through the brutality of war and conquest. And that's what makes the existence of the Popul Vuh all the more remarkable. For some reason, this particular story got saved. It's like a message in a bottle from a long-lost civilization. So there are many layers of wonder that I experience. You know, that first function of myth that Campbell talks about, the metaphysical or mystical function. Yeah, a myth has to break you open into a sense of wonder. I get that pitch very, very much from the Popul Vuh. All right, here we go. In the very beginning, there was only the still sky and the still sea. Nothing moved, and there was no sound because there were no living creatures. There was no earth and no sun or moon to give light. Only God was surrounded with his own light, and he was in the heart of the still dark sky and in the heart of the still dark sea. Isn't that beautiful? That's so good. In the sky, he was called Hurricane, the heart of heaven, and in the depths of the water, where he seemed to shimmer as if covered by green and blue feathers, he was called the feathered serpent. And God planned about making light and life. He knew that man and the dawn must appear together. He planned to make man so that the light could dawn. First he said, "Let the emptiness be filled, let the earth appear." And the earth appeared with mountains, valleys, rivers, lakes, grass, and trees, and vines. But there was still no sound in the darkness. Then God said, "Shall there be only silence under the trees?" Then the animals appeared, the deer and the birds and the snakes and the jaguars and all the others. And God gave them all their places to live and told them to speak, each in his own way. So they began to call and sing and hiss and snarl and scream, each in their own way. But they couldn't speak to each other or understand each other. God saw that they couldn't talk together and they couldn't say any of his names. And he saw that that wasn't enough. Oh, you get a clue here what God wants. He wants relationship. He wants someone who can say his name. So God said, "I will try again. You animals are not able to speak to each other, nor to me, so it will be that you will kill each other. But I need a creature who can speak to me and who can know me and obey me and love me. It is nearly time for the dawn to come. I will make man out of mud." Remember in Genesis 2 where God makes Adam out of clay? Yeah. He made some men out of mud, but they were very soft and limp and couldn't see. And they couldn't speak. They could speak, but what they said didn't make any sense. When they got wet, they couldn't even stand up. God saw that they were no use, and he broke them up and said, "I will try again." Okay, humanity 1.0, total fail. Made out of mud, they melted, they talked nonsense, yeah. 2.0. He made some men out of wood. The wooden men were better. They could walk and talk. They built houses and had children. And there were very many of them, but they were dry and yellow, and their faces had no expression because they had no minds, nor souls, nor hearts. They beat their dogs and they burned the bottoms of their cooking pots. They had forgotten how they were made. They could not remember any of the names of God. And so he said, "These men will not do either. I must destroy them also." And he sent a great flood. I know we haven't talked about flood stories yet, but this is a creation/flood story all wrapped in one. And he sent a great flood, and the houses of the wooden men fell down. The wooden men wanted to escape, but the animals they had starved and beaten, and cooking pots they had burned, and the trees whose branches they had chopped off, all turned against them and wouldn't help them. Only a few of them escaped in the flood, and it is said that their descendants are the monkeys. Yeah. I'd love to see a Disney animated version of this, the pots with the burned bottoms attacking the wooden people. I don't know, it sounded great. And it still hadn't dawned. And God wanted to make real men when the dawn came and the sun rose. He thought about it. He thought that the earth and the sky were not yet ready, and that there were things that had to be done before the sun could move and make light and man could be made. He saw that he had to send two parts of himself to put things in order. These two needed two sons of their own to help them, but at last all was ready, and the two sons entered the sun and the moon to make them move. Then God said, "It is time. I need men on the earth who will know my names, who will obey me and love me, and that will nourish and sustain me." He pondered deeply and discovered the way to make man. Okay, here's man 3.0. He found a beautiful valley full of many plants and fruits And he took ears of yellow corn and of white corn and ground them into meal. He made masa. With the cornmeal, he made 9 kinds of liquor. And these became man's strengths and energies. With the dough of the meal, he shaped a body. And he made 4 men, very strong and handsome. We got 4 Adams in this story, yeah? Made of masa, made of cornmeal, and animated by 9 kinds of corn liquor. While the men, but no women yet, right? But wait, here they come. While the men slept, he made 4 women very carefully. And when the men woke, each found at his side a beautiful wife. And they were very happy when they saw their wives. The Creator said to the 4 men, "You are alive. What do you think about it?" First thing God does is ask a philosophical question. So you're alive. What do you think about being alive? You can see, God said, hear and move and speak. Do you like it? Look at the world. Try and see. The men looked and they were able to see the whole world and everything that was in it. They could see the whole sky. They could see everything. They began to give thanks to their Creator. "Thank you for our life," they said. "We can see, we can hear, we can move and think and speak. We feel and know everything. We can see everything in the earth and in the sky. Thank you for having made us, O our Father." Then the Creator was troubled. What do you think he's going to be troubled about? Then the Creator was troubled, for he realized that these men could see too much and too far, so that they would not really be men, but gods. He saw that he had to change them so that they could be what he needed. So he leaned down and blew mist in their eyes and clouded their vision, like breathing on a mirror. And from then on, nothing was clear to their sight except what was close to them. What a remarkable moment. For me, it's an echo of the Garden of Eden story, chapter 3 of Genesis, because there, God also perhaps was afraid of Adam and Eve becoming like gods. Remember, the serpent said to Eve in Genesis 3, "If you eat the fruit, no, you're not going to die. You're just going to have the knowledge of the gods. You're going to know what the gods know." And in this Popul Vuh story, we see that when God finally made version 3 out of masa and corn liquor and made men and women 4 each, and we were awesome. We could see everything. We knew everything. God's like, uh-oh, I made them too good. They see too much. They know too much. They're like gods. I don't need other gods. I need human beings. And so God takes a mist and blows it in our eyes. And from then on, took us back down a couple notches. From then on, we can only see what was right in front of us. Just finishing up the last few lines. The 4 men and their wives went up to the top of a mountain and waited for the dawn. First, they saw the shining face of the great star, the morning star, which comes ahead of the sun. And they burned incense and unwrapped 3 gifts to offer the sun. And then the sun came up. Then the puma and the jaguar roared, and all the birds stretched their wings and sang, and the men and their wives danced with joy because the sun had risen. It's beautiful. And tucked up into that story is this question, right? This philosophical question of what is our capacity to know as human beings? What can we know, and where is the boundary at which we cannot go further, at which we cannot know more? And in this creation myth, we get an answer to that question. that we know more than animals. That's sort of a biblical claim that we know more than animals, but we're below God in our knowledge. God is omniscient or all-knowing. We just know a little. God is omnipotent or all-powerful. I just have a few powers. And those limitations are part of what it means to be human. And yet, there is, it seems to me, this powerful takeaway too from the Popul Vuh, that this is a portrait of a God who longs for relationship with humanity. And there are echoes of that in the Hebrew Bible, no doubt about it. Maybe not so clear in Genesis 1, 2, and 3, but pulling back and seeing the Hebrew Bible, or what Christians call the Old Testament, as a whole, we see a God who is, in that case also, deeply engaged with the Hebrew people, wanting a covenant with them, wanting a connection, wanting a mutually binding relationship and a mutually beneficial relationship. So there's a cosmological function for you that we get from the Popul Vuh and from Genesis. We get a portrait of the universe in which the creator is a loving creator who made us with great purpose, that human beings have great purpose, that we're of central importance in the cosmos. We've come a long way from the Babylonian creation story, where the purpose of human beings was just to do the work that the gods didn't want to do, just servants. And one final thought about these two stories, the Popul Vuh and Genesis. It's clear in the Popul Vuh that God is learning on the job, right? He makes these three different versions of humanity, and I would say four. The mud people didn't work out at all. The wooden people, not so great. The cornmeal people, he made them too good. And so we had to take them back down into what he really needed. Smart enough to know his name, but not as smart as gods, not gods, humans. And now, in the biblical story, the pitch you normally get from your rabbi, your priest, your minister, is that God is changeless, and God is all-knowing, and God is perfect, and doesn't make mistakes. He's not a trial and error guy. But you and I, looking at the Genesis stories, now plural, and I know we haven't read those flood stories yet, but you know what's going to come in Genesis chapter 8, 9. That's when God decides to kill everybody on earth and flood the world. Everybody except for Noah, who is told by God to build a boat and take the animals 2 by 2 and load your family on. You guys get to live, but you know what? I'm erasing humanity because they're wicked and they're horrible and they have to all die. Just like in the Popul Vuh, a primal flood designed to erase a version of humanity that was woefully inadequate. In other words, if God really were perfect, and this is a question the rabbis of Judaism ask, if God were really perfect and all-knowing and saw the future, wouldn't he have made human beings of a slightly higher quality? Do we need Adolf Hitler, really? Do we need genocide? Do we need cruelty? It's the classic question in all theology. Why is there evil? If God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving, why would there be evil? He knows about it. He's all-knowing. He's powerful enough to stop it because he's all-powerful. And he's perfectly good, and a perfectly good being would not allow there to be evil. So that's called the problem of evil in philosophy or in theology. And we see the beginnings of that problem in both of these stories. My point is this. In the Genesis story, is it not also a little bit like the Popul Vuh? Is not God kind of learning on the job? Maybe this is a question we can take up again when we look at the flood story. But after God kills everybody on earth except Noah, as soon as Noah's boat lands and they get out, God basically says, I will never again do that. I will never again curse the ground on account of man, because I see that man is evil, is wicked from the days of his youth, Genesis tells us. So God kind of shrugs and throws up his hands and says, people, what are you going to do? They're incredibly flawed. And the rabbis ask, well, you made us this way. I mean, don't you bear some responsibility for the actions of your creations? So these are deep questions way above my pay grade. But these are the kind of questions that come up when you dive into close readings of these creation stories and ask these cosmological and metaphysical and philosophical and theological questions. So, which is, by the way, my idea of a good time and pretty fun. So thanks for spending some time with me and the amazingly beautiful story of the Popul Vuh. It's a miracle that it survived from this ancient people called the Mayan, called the Quiche. See you on the other side.